A think tank says that a fear of Islamophobia is stifling debate about religious dress across the UK. So according to Policy Exchange, freedom to discuss Islamic headscarves and face coverings is being denied by Islamist groups. It's a women's rights issue, it's a free speech issue, it's a multiculturalism issue, an integration issue, I suppose. Joining me now to talk about all of this is political commentator Bushra Shaikh. Bushra, thank you very, very much. OK, so do Islamist groups in Britain weaponise Islamophobia as a way of stopping criticism about the burqa or the niqab or the hijab or whatever?
No, I don't think so. I'm just going to this Policy Exchange report. I think it's entirely inaccurate. Look, at the end of the day, Patrick, I think everybody's entitled to criticise a religion, whether that be Islam or any other. The point is we cannot forget that there is clear Islamophobia that exists in Great Britain. In fact, I'd even go to the extent to say that people are dishonourable because they actually do not come forward and say, I just do not like Islam. That's the truth. And we are finding that. So firstly, Islamophobia does exist. And as Muslims, we are open to critique. It's just the way people come at it. They don't come to us sincerely.
It's interesting because I'm looking at what the Muslim Council of Britain have put out in response to this report, right? I'm just reading the headline now. Policy Exchange publishes misogynist report by playing up Islamophobia. With respect, is it not quite misogynistic to make a woman wear a full headscarf and veil?
Well, look, is it misogynistic to make anybody wear anything? Yes. You know, that's false. I don't think any woman or man should be forced to do something that they don't want to do. You know, in fact, we should have the freedom for people to make the choices. At the end of the day, you know, you can look at it at both spectrums. Where do we come in policing the way women choose to dress? This is the actual question. And the truth is, in Great Britain, in fact, people hide behind their own Islamophobia. They're not saying we don't like the hijab because we dislike Islam. You see, so you can't have it both ways. You have to decide, what is your problem with the hijab? What is your problem with any religious attire?
OK, I think there is a certain irony, which I do think will be lost on the Muslim Council of Britain, if people don't mind me saying, which is that the Policy Exchange report is talking about whether or not members of the Islamic community sometimes call Islamophobia as opposed to maybe addressing some of the issues, if indeed there are any, within their own community. The Policy Exchange has published yet another report deploying dog whistle Islamophobia, this time by encroaching on the fundamental religious freedoms of Muslim women. Are they not proving the point there, really? You know, Policy Exchange talking about, you know, a rush to maybe call things Islamophobic as a way of stifling debate about a variety of different things in the Muslim community, and then that report being called Islamophobic by the Muslim Council of Britain.
Patrick, I think the Muslim Council of Britain have a fair point to make, because the Policy Exchange reports often only highlight and target the Muslim community. I generally believe that there is an out-of-context discussion happening here. What might be happening globally, you know, in the world is very different to what's happening here on the ground in Great Britain. They've mentioned things like having something like World Hijab Day isn't conducive to what's going on in Iran. To me, that's absolutely nonsensical. That's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense to say that, because in the UK, we're a very good example of allowing women to dress how they want. We should be the example to the small minority of countries who still do enforce the hijab rule on women.
Are there not elements of the British Muslim community where if you were a woman wanting to free yourself from not particularly wanting to wear the hijab or the burqa or whatever, where you would get a huge amount of pushback on that? And is that not what maybe it's trying to highlight here, that perhaps not everybody who does wear those items of clothing wants to wear those items of clothing, but feels as though they can't not?
Look, ultimately, the way that things used to be, I'd say go back as far as the 80s, things are certainly not like that within the Muslim community. They used to be, but they're not. And this is because there is a good level of information and education out there. So for all of those people that are still doing that, there are a small group. You know, again, this is a very polarizing discussion. It's not happening in the majority of Muslim families in Great Britain anymore. Women are choosing for themselves. And the ones that are still doing that, there are lots of spaces that young women can go to say that this is happening to me. And this isn't just with the hijab. You know, women are being ostracized and persecuted in various different ways within their own personal family circumstances as well. So this isn't just isolated to the headgear.
Do you think that there is a general fear of being called Islamophobic, and that at times prevents quite legitimate criticism about integration amongst the Muslim communities at times?
I think so. I think the first thing is, I think people have to genuinely come to the discussion sincerely. I think the reason why there is a certain level of pushback within the Muslim community in saying this is Islamophobic is because we genuinely feel that. Look, Patrick, I myself have been at the receiving end of Islamophobia. And let me tell you, when I used to wear a hijab, the amount of hate that I received in comparison to now is zero. You know, I've had incidents where I've had my car spat at with my children in it because I was wearing a hijab, and that has not happened to me since taking it off.
Why did you stop?
Out
of interest, just why did you stop?
Well, look, for me personally, you know, wearing a certain level of religious clothing has to be sincere, has to come from the heart, and you really need to know why you're doing it. And I think all of us are on a journey of life, aren't we? We're a journey, whether that's with God or whether that's just life in general. And I think things look different all the time. So it wasn't because I felt oppressed, or it was just for me, it wasn't working at the time for me. It's not something that I would ever say no to in the future, and I might come back to it. But honestly, I feel like the way we're going in Great Britain, what I don't want is to end up like France at the moment. I feel like we can be one of the better examples to the wider global community of what it can look like to coexist happily.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got here Labour MP Khalid Mahmood, Birmingham, Perry Barr, you know, it's an area with huge Muslim population, right? Says a certain proportion of Muslim women may wish to wear a hijab or a niqab or publicly demonstrate their Muslim identity, but the wearing of the hijab clearly does not represent all Muslim women, and it is grossly insensitive to those Muslim women in Iran and Afghanistan and Yemen and elsewhere who are compelled against their wishes to wear the hijab to declare that it does. So how would you respond to that? Because from a Western man, right, a Christian man, I do find it bizarre that when women in a lot of those countries are given the opportunity to take the item of clothing off, they tend to, and then it does appear to be armed men who tell them to put it back on.
Yeah, look, the first thing is I don't think using Iran is a true representation of the, let's say, Muslim world. There are more than 30 to 50 Muslim countries that exist, and none of those countries enforce the hijab, and Iran does. Ultimately, this is look, Iran faces its own issues between the state and the clerics when it comes to what rules and policies that they're enforcing. But those women tend to have the extreme side of it, and they take it off. Why? Because they don't get the choice. I think it's important for global leaders to understand, even from a perspective of a woman, that it's important to have the choice in what they should wear. At the end of the day, I don't want any government or any state even having the right to even undress women. So essentially, if someone's trying to ban the hijab, that's also the same as trying to enforce it.
So, just hypothetically now, I mean, this situation has actually happened. It's not that hypothetical, where parents have said that their child's nursery school teacher, who was wearing the full burqa, full niqab, the kids couldn't necessarily understand what she was saying, and also maybe felt a little bit uneasy because they were young children and weren't used to it. Would that be Islamophobic, do you think, for a parent to go into that school and raise that as a concern?
Totally not. I feel like people have concerns and they're well within their rights to say that. But Patrick, let me tell you something now. It's the ignorant associations mostly that people have with the Islamic attire. Because I'm going to say this, when our teachers were wearing masks in school and our students and my kids could not understand what the teachers were saying because their mouths were covered, where were those policing individuals then? Now they want to say we can't understand Muslim women, look at what they're wearing. But when, COVID lockdowns happened, there were hundreds of teachers wearing masks and you could not understand a single thing that they were saying in the classrooms. And that's essentially, but nobody raised the contention then. So ultimately, this isn't about what they're wearing. This is about the association, the ignorant one linked to Islamic clothing.
It's a fascinating argument, Bushra. I must say, sadly, we are out of time because I would love to keep going back and forth on this. But Bushra Shaikh, there, political commentator, friend of the show, thank you very much. Look, what do you make of that?